morning, members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those following via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to this meeting of the Committee of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment, and Infrastructure, number 2 of today, Wednesday, January 18th, 2023. I would like to welcome the Minister of Cvromi, Mr. Edward Duran, and his support staff. We have a quorum of 12 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received notice of lateness from MP Peterson. Are there any other notifications from the members of Parliament? MP Bryson, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, to our Secretary General. I think we're good. To our Secretary General, to my colleague members of Parliament, the Honorable Minister present, and those following us by our new sharp, crisp forms of media. I would like to, first of all, state that and really to a congratulations to the Secretariat and also the people that maintain the building. As people may notice, we have upgraded our system here in Parliament, something that has been in the work for quite some time to improve the AV equipment in Parliament that has been in place for 12 years, and we now have a new system. For that reason, as the Secretariat had informed the public that there would have been a sort of a longer time period than normal to which we would start Parliament, but we're back now and on time and on schedule, and I know that it took a lot of work from all the individuals involved, and I just want to say thank you all for a job well done, and we look forward to continued broadcasts of the Parliament of St. Martin. And of course, a Happy New Year to one and all. I normally have a rule that after the 10th of January, I don't say Happy New Year no more. So from now on, this is the last Happy New Year, but no, indeed, to everyone, Happy New Year.
Thank you, MP Bryson, and Happy New Year to you all and people of St. Martin. I will now give the floor to MP Angelique Rameau. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasant good morning to you, Mr. Chairman. A pleasant good morning to my colleague MPs. A pleasant good morning to our Honorable Minister and his support staff. I too would like to join with my colleague MP Bryson in congratulating the Secretariat for a job well done. We are excited about our new equipment, and we thank you once again. Also, I would like to thank I would also like to say a Happy New Year to the viewing and listening public. Unlike Mr. MP Bryson, I continue to say Happy New Year throughout the month of January because it's still pretty new for me. So I just wanted to share that with the public, wishing everyone a safe, prosperous 2023, and I look forward to having a very fruitful and awesome working relationship with my colleagues in 2023. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Rameau. And I'll give the floor to MP Pontiflet. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the Chair, my colleagues in Parliament, of course, our Honorable Minister of Cvromi, his support staff, persons that are viewing. Mr. Chairman, indeed, we can say Happy New Year, but of course, I've been on radio, TV saying it, so I guess it'll be my third time saying that. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say something that is a bit different to some of my colleagues in the sense of how they began their discourse. On my way here, Mr. Chairman, I realized that, again, their discussion came up where persons are stating about things that government should do and government are not doing. But again, Mr. Chairman, I want to use this forum to talk to persons who are refusing to do the census to please participate in the census. Some of the areas that I heard that are refusing, Mr. Chairman, is unbelievable. I'm not defending those in other areas, but these particular areas where I would say the high class live, Mr. Chairman, they are refusing to take part in the census. And I think That is not good because when government plans regards to education, health, infrastructure, Mr. Chairman, government needs data in order to make their policies and their laws, Mr. Chairman. So again, I understood there's a meager fine of $500, Mr. Chairman. I think I've heard some persons say they would pay not to take part in the census. Mr. Chairman, we should find a way to work around it because why? In order for government to have proper plans and policies, they need to do a survey and get an accurate figure as to how many persons are living in St. Martin in order to make sure that that the plans that they make, the laws that they make, Mr. Chairman, can comply or is equal to what it is they find out there in St. Martin. So again, I'm urging these persons to participate in the census. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Pontiflet. I now give the floor to MP Westcott Williams. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a good morning, of course, to you. A good morning to my colleagues. Allow me to extend wishes for a prosperous, bright, happy, blessed, healthy year, 2023, to my colleagues and their families and all within the reach of my voice. Happy New Year. Mr. Chairman, I too want to add words of commendation to the Secretariat of Parliament. I know it was a race against the clock, so to speak, to get the equipment at least to the point where it can be utilized, and that is today, as the previous speaker indicated. It is in process. It's a work in process. The reason I'm stalling is I'm sure that those behind the booth are trying to get the volume of my voice. Yes. So okay. So that's why I was also stalling. But Mr. Chairman, so congratulations to our secretariat. I recognize it was a race against the clock to get us going here in Parliament, and as you know, that was the reason for starting today, starting this week. Mr. Chairman, I also think it's important that I mention, because the question has been posed to me, and I therefore earlier in a little working session posed the question regarding, now that we are with this new equipment before us, whether the live stream that used to take place of Parliament meetings via Facebook in particular. Again, I pause a moment just to, it's okay? Can continue. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was making the point because I have received the question not now, but all along while we were looking at installing new equipment, because remember that the stopping of Facebook live streaming of Parliament meetings, oftentimes the issue of our system was used, and the outdated nature of our system was used as a reason for not having or for stopping temporarily or not Facebook live streaming. Mr. Chairman, I need to inform the public that I asked the question like I've done in the past, and I was informed this morning during a work session regarding the equipment and its application that this particular matter, Facebook live streaming of Parliament meetings, will be discussed by the Presidium of Parliament, and I asked the Presidium to inform me as soon as possible what the outcome is of a discussion regarding Parliament's live streaming on Facebook. Mr. Chairman, before we go over to the meeting itself, let me use notifications as well to make note of the fact that today we sit here based on a request by the Minister of Cvromi to present the spatial policy to the Parliament of St. Martin. And Mr. Chairman, as those of you who would have seen the agenda for this meeting, it is evident that my request of June 15th regarding social spatial planning and hillside policy, that is also on the agenda for today. point number 4. However, I indicated that I have no issue with all of these related matters being put together under the first topic, which is the presentation by the minister. But I need to make note of the fact, and maybe the chairperson of parliament can better address that. When I look at the meetings for this week and take into consideration, for example, that I also have a request for a meeting with the committee of Cvromi regarding beach policy and moratoriums. We hear nothing about that, but the minister makes a proposal to present his spatial development plan, and we have that in the meeting. So my reference to the chairperson of parliament has to do with maybe explaining how these meetings have come about. In addition to that, several MPs, including myself, have the request for a public meeting regarding tax reform. Yet, we see where a public meeting has been scheduled for this coming Friday regarding a request from members of parliament going back to, I believe, 2021 that have to do with the Mullet Bay inquiry and the commission for that particular committee. So, Mr. Chairman, I just needed to express my lack of understanding with the way that the chairperson of parliament tends to deal with requests by members of parliament. What exactly the view of these members of parliament are considered urgent. So, Mr. Chairman, the other matters I'll leave for the agenda point when it comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. Should there extend the for the beach policy meeting committee on planning. So we'll get back to you with the information on the date. Are there any notifications? Okay. Thank you for your notifications. The agenda points for this meeting are 1. The presentation on the Spatial Development Strategy 2030, document IS 017 2022 to 2023, dated September 15, 2022. Yes, MP Bryson.
Notice that is also on the live stream. There's a slight, maybe you might need an adjournment.
Okay, MP Bryson, meeting will be adjourned for 2 minutes. We adjourn. Welcome back. Apologies for the delay, but we have a new system, so we finally have it back online. So I go back over to the agenda points. Agenda point 1, presentation on the Spatial Development Strategy 2030, document IS-017, 2022 to 2023, dated September 15, 2022. Agenda point 2, discussion on the policy and legislation on natural risk and sustainable construction development and the protection of public infrastructure. Agenda point 3, discussion on the steps needed to safeguard both our sustainable construction development and the safety of our inhabitants and visitors. Document IS-1077, 2021 to 2022, dated June 21st, 2022. And agenda point 4, update and discussion on the island zoning and spatial planning and the hillside policy with the Minister of Cvromi, document IS-1030, 2021 to 2022, dated June 15, 2022. Before we, agenda point 1 was requested by the Minister of Cvromi. Agenda point 2 and 3 were requested by myself, MP Brownville, and agenda point 4 was requested by MP Westcott Williams. Before going over to the first agenda point, I would like to propose the following, considering that on June 20th, 2022, the community of Cvromi sent a letter to the Minister of Cvromi after having met with a representative of Acrobatics BV regarding the mitigation of natural risk in sustainable construction development and the protection of the users of public infrastructure, requested the view and feedback of the Minister on the presentation, and requested an update on the status of the building decree and the Cvromi ordinance. Also considering the request of my person on June 21, 2022, as chair of this committee, for a meeting with the Minister to discuss the policy and legislation on natural risk and sustainability construction development and protection of public infrastructure and the steps needed in order to safeguard both our sustainable construction development and the safety of our inhabitants and investors. And also, considering the request of MP Westcott Williams on June 15th, 2022, for a meeting to discuss the island zoning and spatial planning and the hillside policy. I would like to propose that we handle all the above mentioned requests in the first agenda point, as they all overlap each other and are on the topic of spatial planning and infrastructure. Can the committee agree? If the committee agrees, the sole agenda point of this committee will be the presentation on the Spatial Development Strategy 2030, document IS-017, 2022 to 2023, dated September 15th, 2022. Would anyone like the floor on this proposal? MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have no issue with the proposal, as I mentioned earlier, to incorporate all of these agenda points into the more general one of spatial development to be presented by the minister. However, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be a good thing if, when, for example, we have a proposal coming from a committee for whether it be to invite the minister or to ask questions, that it be mentioned specifically that based on discussions in the committee, this request for information or an invitation went to the minister. In the case of I'm talking convocations now. So where it would seem as if the chairperson asks for these meetings, however, one of them at least is the result of discussions in the committee of Cvromi. And I just wanted that to be made clear. So just an observation regarding how it is stipulated, how the agenda points for today are stipulated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. We now go over to. Do everyone else agree on compiling to one agenda point? Okay, thank you. So, okay, we now go over to the agenda, presentation on the Spatial Development Strategy 2030, document IS 017, 2022 to 2023, dated September 15, 2022. On September 15, 2022, Parliament received a letter from the Minister of Cvromi, Mr. Egbert Durand, with the request for a meeting with the Cvromi Committee of Parliament with the above-mentioned agenda. This document is registered as incoming document IS 017, PY 2022 to 2023, dated September 15, 2022, and can be found on the P drive of Parliament. Hence today, this meeting. At this time, I would first like to give the floor to the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, Mr. Egbert Durand, for his introductory remarks and presentation. Okay. On January 13, 2023, Parliament received a copy of the Spatial Development Strategy 2030 from the Minister of Cvromi. This document is registered on the IS 352, 2022 to 2023, and was shared with the members of Parliament. Minister Durand, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning to the honorable members of Parliament. Good afternoon, sorry. To my support team and everyone tuned in here and abroad. Mr. Chairman, I would like to also wish, since this is the first parliamentary meeting, wish the members of Parliament a prosperous and a productive 2023. I'll dive right into the presentation. I'd like to start by giving the first indication as to what is the Spatial Development Strategy. The Spatial Development Strategy is a policy that envisions our national spatial planning until 2030 and provides guidelines on how to carry out this vision. This entire initiative was spearheaded by the Policy Department, of which I have Ms. Raitsa Narain, who's the acting head of the Policy Department here with me. It aims for sustainable spatial development, meaning that spatial development should meet the needs of the present without compromising the future generations to meet their own needs. Therefore, a balance should be sought between the economic, social, and environmental domain when developing and preserving our space, our scarce space. It provides direction for making well-informed decisions on new spatial developments. It serves as a framework for the establishing of legislation and area-specific policies relating to our built and natural environment. For example, zoning plans, updated St. Martin Building Code, the nature policy, and the country sewage master plan. The spatial development vision finds its legal basis in our Constitution. Article 22 of the Constitution states, "We, the people of St. Martin, resolve to provide the continuing the preservation of nature and the environment. It shall be the government's constant concern to keep the country habitable and also protect and improve our environment." The second point, the National Ordinance on Foundations for Spatial Development Planning, Article 2. The Minister does the necessary in the preparation of the coherent and sustainable government policy for the development of land. In Dutch, de minister doet het nodige ter voorbereiding van een samengehangen en duurzaam regeringsbeleid voor de ontwikkeling van het gebied van Sint Maarten. The Spatial Development Strategy was made through research analyzing spatial development trends of the past few decades and doing desk research of other governmental policies and programs related to the spatial planning and land use. In addition, various stakeholder sessions were held with other ministries and semi-governmental institutions. For example, the Princess Juliana International Airport and our harbor. Lastly, the information obtained during the zoning plan town hall meetings was used as input for the SDS as well. Particularly during these meetings, it was mentioned that St. Martin was lacking an overarching countrywide spatial planning vision and strategy, a bigger picture on spatial planning, so to speak. The SDS is also linked to the National Development Vision, which was recently launched. The SDS takes the National Development Vision into account, but focuses on the spatial planning sides of the vision, meaning it looks at the spatial implications of the vision. The SDS proposals are also linked to Sustainable Development Goals set forth by the United Nations. The strategy document entails a chapter in which these are linked further in the elucidation. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I would like to have Ms. Narain give the further presentation on the rest of the slides.
Ms. Lorraine, you may have the floor.
Thank you. I will dive further into the document itself. As the minister said, the strategy was made through researching and analyzing spatial development trends of the past few decades. In the past few decades, St. Martin has been facing several spatial development challenges. Proper spatial planning, in particular on small islands like St. Martin, has been proven to be very complex because we are living on limited land surface that is already characterized by a hilly nature, so already quite difficult to develop. And on top of that, we've been faced with a growing population that places even more pressure on our limited available land. And that not only comes from population growth, but also tourism growth, which we all know is our main income product. Unfortunately, due to these rapid growths of our population and tourism, the claims to our land is becoming more and more numerous and urgent, and the government has not always been able to adequately manage these pressures on our space. So specific land use issues that have been noticeable in the past few decades is what I mentioned already, rapid population growth from approximately 3,000 inhabitants in 1960 to 42,500 in 2020. As we are speaking, the census is being carried out, so we'll have an official number again this year. But nevertheless, this growth comes with an increased pressure on our land use and development. We've also seen an increase in incompatible developments competing for space. For instance, in the K-Bay area, we see close to residential areas and the GB electricity plant. We've seen loss of natural areas, inland waters, increase in development in the hillsides, an increase in waste and a difficult to manage landfill, which keeps expanding and increasing the risk of water, air, and soil pollution. An increase in our tourism, which led to large hotel and resort developments in coastal areas and places high pressure on our public spaces or beaches. It increases our waste production as well. We all know that St. Martin is highly prone to the effects of climate change due to our large coastal areas and the fact that we are located in a hurricane belt, and we've seen an increase in hurricane strengths. The sea level is rising, rainfall increases, and our built-up areas have not always been able to withstand the forces of these natural disasters. We've also seen a rapid development. The rapid development also places great pressure on our water drainage, our sewage systems, which can lead to faster flooding in the lower lying areas and all kinds of other sewage problems. And lastly, an increasing mismatch between housing supply and demand. The housing market does not cater to all socioeconomic groups of society, especially the starters and low-income groups, and also the elderly. So given these past and current adverse spatial effects and in light of external factors such as increasing competition for tourist destinations, climate change, and continuing population growth, having this overarching coherent strategy for spatial development, sustainable spatial development, was and is as relevant as ever. Therefore, the vision for future spatial planning, as described in this strategy, is to realize an optimal living, working, and recreational environment for our country, and in the future, making St. Martin a cleaner, a more closely knit, and a prosperous country. Clean in two senses: that we have a beautiful and attractive landscape, and on the other hand, a country with minimal pollution, ecologically stable, and a high quality of life for present and future generations. Closely knit in a sense that we don't just live close to each other, but also feel closely connected in social and cultural terms. We share a space together, we feel connected to each other and the environment that we live in. And prosperous in the sense that our country has a strong economy, offers everyone opportunities, is resilient, and characterized by diversity. So a future that we can all look forward to, in other words. Next slide, please. So in general, all the developments that I described are placing more pressure. No, they indicate that our physical living environment is being used more intensively, and intensive in a way that places pressure on our ecological sustainability, but also on our social appreciation and the livability of our living environment. And we need a new balance between that user value, the economic utilization, our experience value, and our future value, so the ecological sustainability. What we've seen is that focus has been a lot on the economic side of development, meaning that we are using space to the max, and only focusing on that one-sided orientation. Places our carrying capacity under pressure, and it maybe already has been exceeded. And this has consequences for our future-proofness, the future-proofness of our soil, the water systems, and our biodiversity, which asks for us to make more important, more sustainable choices now, sooner than ever. So it is in everybody's interest that we design, organize, and use the space on St. Martin more efficiently and sustainably as possible, taking into account the current and future demand and supply of land, while also balancing our economic, social, and environmental needs. This figure indicates where sustainable spatial development lies, namely in the overlap between our economy, our social domain, and our environment. And reaching this balance is challenging. It is not only St. Martin that is challenged with reaching such a balance. It is actually a problem of a lot of small island development states. And this is because we are so small. So land use conflicts for housing, for residential areas, for agriculture areas, leisure development are far more pressing than in countries that have a lot of space. As a ministry of Cvromi, we are responsible for advising and creating policies, legislation, to organize and design the physical form of our space in such a way that a better balance between these three domains can be reached. And we can do this through creating equitable access to jobs, housing, and social interactions, prioritizing urban renewal by planning for the provision of accessible and well-connected infrastructure and services. Through our policies, we can encourage more sustainable relationships between the tourism sector and our ecosystems and protect key ecological sites through legislation. So what the spatial development strategy does is that it sets forth a number of proposals or guidelines for each of these sectors, which are aimed at strengthening that sector, but of course also taking the other two into account. So in the economic domain, the proposals are aimed at the development of the quality of life of residents and the use of scarce natural resources. For instance, proposals on stayover tourism are made to promote the development of niche market for small-scale development, small-scale boutique or lifestyle hotels, so shifting away from mass tourism and focusing more on beauty, uniqueness, authenticity, quality. This can, for instance, be done through drafting of an aesthetics policy. Another proposal is to facilitate and encourage the development of land-based attractions, in particular in the field of cultural heritage and ecotourism, by beautification and protection of our historical and cultural sites and cultural routes, for instance. Another proposal is in the field of upgrading existing main roads, improving the traffic flow by improving mobility for visitors, especially in congested and crowded areas, by retrofitting our infrastructure. This can be done through zoning, through our zoning regulations. Next slide, please. In the social domain, the proposals are aimed at social sustainability, reducing vulnerability and maintaining the health of our social and cultural systems, and enhancing human capital, strengthening social values, institutions and equity to improve the resilience of social systems. Proposals are made on housing, for instance, incorporating regulations on affordable housing in zoning plans, but also in new developments, for instance, proposing that a percentage of the development should be appointed to affordable housing. Another proposal is on the enhancement of public areas. Through our policies and legislation, we should ensure public access to beaches. We're already doing that with our beach policy, but it can be updated. Encourage the development of public parks and community gardens in residential area can also be done through zoning. The last chapter goes into the environment, where the proposals are aimed at the creating awareness of the impacts of certain developments on land and environment to ensure a balanced use of space and a healthy environment. When it comes to climate change, through zoning regulations, the harnessing of energy through rooftop solar panels is encouraged. And within the Atmos, hydrosphere, and biosphere, a proposal to strengthen this is to implement new environmental norms, for instance, for soil, air, and noise pollution. And the strategy concludes or ends with this spatial development strategy map. The map portrays the strategy by visualizing or at least the main proposals through different icons, which are located in the different areas and explained in the legend as well. And furthermore, the map itself is separated into 3 parts. This is a bit zoomed into, for instance, Simpson Bay. It's separated into west, middle, and east. And these maps are also published for everyone's perusal and downloading from our website. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lorraine.
Narain.
Sorry?
Narain.
Narain, sorry. And I give the floor to MP Duran. Oh, sorry, Minister. You was an MP, so Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, this is a synopsis of the entire strategy. And in short, because it's pretty extensive, a lot of time and effort went into this. It's about a bit over 5 years of work. So I want to use this opportunity to also thank the policy department for their input, and also Ms. Narain, who has been the tracker for the last couple of months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to any questions members of Parliament might have.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. I will give the floor to MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I want to, through you, thank the minister and his support staff for the presentation on the synopsis of the spatial development strategy. And Mr. Chairman, allow me to ask in first instance, because this is a strategy and labeled Spatial Development Strategy 2030. I would therefore have to assume that it is a plan, now that a strategy is in place, to go forward from now on to 2030? Or is it that this will be pursued in 2030? And the reason I'm asking this question is whether already there are actionable plans as a result of this strategy, and if there is a budget. So first, are the plans there, specific actionable plans on the basis of the strategy to be undertaken over the course of a multi-year program? And if so, then what are the budget consequences for this actionable program? Mr. Chairman, as I view the presentation, I wonder about the cohesion of policies and whether this strategy, and I realize that apparently it has been approved by the Council of Ministers, but what about the cohesion of this policy with especially the Ministry of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transportation, and Telecommunication? What about the cohesion as I see some of the items that this strategy entails? And Mr. Chairman, looking at the situation now, a strategy development plan 2030 for St. Martin, I want to stand still a moment by issues facing us right now as partially because of the lack of the spatial development policy. And those questions go as follows. Currently, we don't lack policies. And one of the policies that regard this presentation would be the hillside policy. And from the ministry, I would like to know how the application of this policy, where it regards requests for building, what are the experiences right now of the ministry with respect to the application of the hillside policy? And why this question? I know of the hillside policy. I know the hillside policy also includes ways and means of excavating in the hills. If I look around me, not with any expert eye in that area because I don't have it, I doubt that permits could have been given off, taking into consideration the hillside policy and the way these different areas are being excavated, are being dug. So again, specifically, what is the ministry's experience with respect to applying the hillside policy when it comes to requests? My question. Then I want to go over to another plan that I realize is available or has been drafted, a policy actually, and that is the Nature Policy Plan of St. Martin. Now, in accordance with de landsverordening, regels in zaken natuur en de bescherming, etc., etc., a nature policy plan requires the approval of Parliament. Can the ministry inform me whether that approval on this plan was ever given? Spatial development strategy also brings into view the issue of zoning and or development plans. Can the ministry, per district, give a status update with respect to the zoning plans and or development plans? The landsbesluit rather, houdende algemene maatregelen with respect to the bouwbesluit. When is the intention to implement this bouwbesluit, as the implementation of the building code, let me use that word, is to take place by landsbesluit. And I would like to know what is the intention and views of the ministry with respect to putting that building code into effect by landsbesluit. When and what steps are being taken towards putting it into effect? And then very specifically, what is the status with respect to the former Great Bay Hotel property and the ministry's check on what is happening across the road from that, and where the hill is not, I can't even say slowly, but is eroding? Is the minister having anything done with respect to that? In connection with my question regarding zoning plans and and preparation resolutions, has there ever been one drafted for the Mullet Bay, Coopercoy area? Maho, Mullet Bay, Coopercoy area. If so, what is the status? Mr. Chairman, it's not now that I have been on or behind these issues, and I sent questions regarding the beach policy and the application thereof by the ministry, and the minister responded, and I got some answers regarding it. So I want to ask the minister, in connections with the answers provided to me about the beach policy, which of the beach policies has the minister consulted and or applied to give these answers? I want to, at the same time, touch on the issue that I mentioned earlier of cohesion of policies. We all know of or most of us know of the 2012, I believe it was, beach policy of the Ministry of Tiat. However, there's also a beach policy of Cvromi. I want to know if it's this government's intention to update the beach policy and get a general beach policy by the government of St. Martin for the people of St. Martin, is my question. So firstly, the first question is, on the basis of which beach policy did the minister answer my questions regarding, for example, the Mullet Bay Beach? I asked specific questions and answers were given and how many licenses were given out, etc. But which of the policies were applied to give me those answers? I would like the ministry to please provide me the answer to. And then, Mr. Chairman, continuing on that topic, we also have a meeting pending, I guess. It's to finalize the petition that was made with respect to activities having gone on the Mullet Bay Beach. We got a petition, and that petition, as is required of petitions, needed to be handled by the Parliament. The Parliament did so, forwarded it to the minister, and the minister responded and presented some documents. And I would like to know the ministry's view, and maybe it's a more government view, on providing information to Parliament. I can understand third party is differently, but the information that we received regarding the permits granted, etc., are anonymized documentation. And I want to know if the ministry is of the opinion that this is the way to provide Parliament, mind you, with information. And Mr. Chairman, the first question I pose, which is I want to close my questioning with, is the issue of fine. We have a spatial development strategy. We have several other policies regarding spatial development. And so my question is, in that respect, twofold: actionable items resulting from it, 1, a budget to go with it, 2, and the cohesion of policies by government where that is concerned, specifically where the zoning is concerned, as well as the beaches on St. Martin. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams, and I'll go to MP Bryson. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning once again, one and all. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank the Minister for the presentation. I think what was presented and what was provided to Parliament was very good and in-depth. Is there an issue? Oh, okay. What was provided and presented to Parliament is very good. It is something that, you know, is a step, yet another step that we see the government is taking to do things that one would think have been in place for a long time. These are the type of improvements that can definitely help our country plan the way forward. It helps developers as well, because you already know in advance, well, this is where and how we see St. Martin moving forward and developing ourselves. And that is the essence of spatial planning. So I want to applaud the Minister and the ministry as a whole for taking this step and creating this strategy. But I do want to ask a few questions on something that is directly linked to this, in my opinion, and might be what can become really a bottleneck for the execution of this strategy. And that is, in general, the granting of building permits. Because regardless of the strategy that's in place, people will still need to apply for building permits. Nonetheless, it will have to be in line, of course, with the strategy, etc. But the application process still is in place. And Mr. Chairman, it is still, and I've asked during several budget debates, we get updates that, you know, it's going faster and it's improving. But we still hear that some people, unfortunately, there's many delays and so on. And maybe one misconception that the minister can clarify today is that many in the public are under the impression that a building permit basically goes to the minister office, a request, and then he looks at it and he signs off. Maybe it's good for the minister to give an explanation that there is a process that it goes through a department and an SG and so on, so that, and this is a legal process, because oftentimes, and this happens in TIA, this happens in immigration, everything, oftentimes the finger is directly pointed at the minister, but we know that there are many moving parts that are part of this process. And my question in terms of overseeing the Ministry of Cvromi is those processes. I understand there are many hardworking people within the permits department, especially that want to process as many permits as possible. But they may be limited in terms of resources, they may be limited in terms of staff. So maybe if we can get an update from the minister, a brief update on that, because again, this is a potential bottleneck to the execution of this strategy. I do have a suggestion, something that I've stated before, and I don't want to just, complain, oh, permits too slow, and not even maybe present suggestions. That's really what I think we should be doing, working together to see what is possible. And looking at the national ordinance of building permits, it is indeed the minister, and this is by national ordinance, it's not something he can mandate. The granting of the permits is ultimately signed off by the minister. However, the process of reviewing it, that is left up to interpretation. And what I want to ask is and suggest, can, let's say, the engineering aspects, so the review of the specifications, the building codes, making sure and so on, can the minister get some sort of outsourced assistance to do the reviewing part of this, and maybe you have a third party, we have many local engineers that can get involved, that assist department in processing, and well, not processing, but analyzing that technical aspect that puts the department more in a position where they just have to ultimately kind of review and draft their advices. Now, of course, that may come at a cost, but we also know that permits have a price. The more permits we process, the more income we can get. And then an indirect source of income for the government is that the more building permits and the quicker we process them, the more economic activity, the more construction that's happening. People pay turnover tax, the laborers are paying wage tax, they're paying social premiums. So although, yes, it might come at an additional cost, I can't say I've calculated it, but I do think ultimately it will be to the benefit of it. So just want to understand and see that we're not just looking at spatial planning in its own sort of, in its own realm. It is, in my opinion, really directly tied to the processing of permits. So I would like to hear from the minister what plans there would be for that. In addition to that, I have a question regarding Article 22 of the national ordinance that oversees the granting of building permits. And Article 22, it talks about a decision to grant a conditional permit or to refuse it. Well, it talks about refusing or granting conditional permits. The reason I bring this up is this also something, based on the fact that you have an overall strategy, if someone submits, it could be someone that wants to build their first home, a developer, someone that wants to build apartments, and they submit a permit that is easy to see that it is in line with the strategy. Can the ministry, or what would be the mechanism in place to somehow start to grant, or let me don't say start because I don't know if it's happening, but using this Article 22 to give a conditional permit that states, look, generally based on our analysis, we think that this is something that is in line, it is safe, it abides by the law. We can conditionally grant this building permit as long as the ultimate specifications that are submitted to the department fulfill XYZ conditions, which of course will come back to the details of the national ordinance, and it was suggested maybe even a national decree that outlines those building codes. So the use of conditional permits, where does the minister see that being something that can help and making it in line with the development strategy? One of the things that I would like to ask about this as well, does the minister have plans to publicize, not just locally, but wherever possible, to potential development firms? There are various development conferences, such as one that I attended. Actually, Prime Minister William Allen at the time, and I as tourism director went to the, it was called, I think it's the Association of Black Hotel Entrepreneurs. I probably don't have the exact acronym, but those type of conferences, that's an opportunity where the minister, or even on their website or whatever, can start to show, look, this is the overall strategy, this is what we want to see for St. Martin, and it can then attract those type of developers. Would the minister have in mind to kind of share the word that this is the development strategy of our country, more on the commercial development side of things? We are still 1,000 rooms, or more or less, below pre-Irma levels in terms of the number of hotel rooms we normally have, and we should have grown since then, so there is still room, I think, in terms of our hotel, I mean, is it room, not in terms of land maybe. We have to be very efficient with our land, and I'll come to that next. But in terms of hotel room inventory, we are still under what we normally would be, which is around 4,300 rooms. We're not there yet. So maybe this strategy is something that is attractive to developers because it becomes clear what the guidelines are, what the ministry's vision and the country's vision is in terms of spatial planning from a commercial aspect. And my final question is in that regard about the limited amount of land. I've heard the minister, and I fully agree, when he talks about, you know, we have to make efficient use of land. Can the minister maybe expound a little bit on the possibilities or the vision in terms of building up instead of building horizontally? So do we envision more high-rise buildings in the future of St. Martin? What would be the process, or what can be done to make it attractive and easy for people to be able to start applying for such permits? And has that part of the strategy taken into account our aviation restrictions and aviation planning as well? A lot of those aviation plannings are centered around the airport, but when you're landing from runway 28, the opposite side, you still have other aviation zones that sometimes come into play. So I would just like to know that aspect from in terms of building up, because we see that there are more of them. Our opinion is that, yes, you don't want to just only become a high-rise country, but I do believe there's room for more. It is efficient use of land, it can be attractive, it can be inexpensive compared to building, let's say, just a 2-story building on 500 square meters, as opposed to going up. That lowers the overall cost per square meter of the developer. So the minister's comments on that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I now give the floor to MP Remo. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the Honorable Minister and his staff for presenting us with a very extensive Spatial Development Strategy 2030 plan. I have a few questions for the Minister regarding this plan. The first question is, what were the results of the spatial planning trend analysis of the past decades in reference to DES research? Can this be provided to Parliament if you do have this in your possession? Were any key areas of concern found during the trend analysis? What is the government's plan as it pertains to the pressure that is being put on land and infrastructure use due to the growth of tourism? And Minister, can you please elaborate on the plans to retrofit the infrastructure? Can you also explain how the retrofitting will be maintained? While on the topic of infrastructure, what is the government's plan in terms of allocating funds to sufficiently improve and maintain the country's infrastructure? Minister, in your presentation, you mentioned that it is in everyone's interest to organize and use land space as efficiently and sustainably as possible, taking into account the current and future demand for land, and thereby balancing our economic, social, and environmental needs. How is the Ministry of Cvromi overseeing or guiding the people in this area? And finally, Minister, through you, Mr. Chair, in your presentation, there is mention of harnessing of energy through rooftop solar panels. Can you elaborate on the benefits and disadvantages of this for the country? I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Remo. I now give the floor to MP Arundel. You may have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the members of Parliament, also the Minister and support staff. Wow. You hear me? Okay. Minister, in your public release about a country-wide spatial development strategy in Yeah, okay. Minister, in your public release in the country-wide spatial development strategy 2030, you made a mention of we having taller buildings because we haven't make more space for that. We have indeed noticed the new development and construction in several high-rise buildings, mostly in the Kupakoi area. They are attracting a high-end visitors, again, to St. Martin. My question is the following. Recently, in the new large rise luxurious project, Aqua Resort, can you give a more insight on the development on the stages, if possible? Also, will there be continued access to the Kupakoi beach, taken to the zoning, planning into consideration? And are there any pending requests for construction for more high-rise building? If yes, how many are pending? And in what areas are the requests? Also, I noticed that in the feed, we also were saying about we live in a hurricane disaster zone area, taken to the hurricanes we have in the past for several hurricanes. My question is, what is the government primary principle, rules and steps for the upcoming year in place, taking place for these new development for houses, for the new development for hurricanes? Also, green buildings are apparent in several parts of the world. Even in Brazil, these are the buildings are providing sustainable and materials for use for green buildings are obtained from natural and renewable resources. The key points for these green buildings are energy and water efficiency. A difference between subsidiary building and green building is the subsidiary building are operated with the three subsidiary pillars in the mind. Sorry. In the planet of profit, where the latter force solely an environment. Has any building requests submitted for the construction of such a green building on this island yet? Are the thought of solar energy now in our future for solar environment for the people instead for major building, but for the people like in KB or so for solar environment to help everybody? Also, I mentioned, my colleague mentioned about the building permits also, Orlando, MB Orlando. I would like to also ask about the transfer of government leased land. Some people complain about the process taking too long. What's the hold up, if it's the department or so? And that will be all for now.
Thank you, MP Arundel. I now give the floor to MP De Weaver. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Minister and his team for this strategy. This is a step in the right direction of something that had to happen here a long time ago. And I think that it also exposes the rest of the island in this public document that priorities should be going forward, that we need to sort of live in balance with our environment at the forefront. And when I'm going to go straight into starting from what I heard from my colleague MPs, when you listen to colleagues questioning what is the goal of how we're going to be the new way of living, if it's going to be in high rise or low rise, I think it goes back to the question of what do we envision for our island? Do we want to be an island or do we want to be Miami? And I keep that in mind, not because it's not deterring or criticizing what is currently there, but what is our long-term vision for this island? Do we want to be a skyscraper island in the Caribbean, or do we want to be a charming island in the Caribbean? And when you look at your picture of your presentation of this boutique-style hotel, it is in direct contradiction with the high-rise living and high-rise hotel. So that's why I wanted to get your opinion on that. In addition, there was some comments made beforehand on where this goes in line with the tourism plan, and I will refer to the article today from the PFP faction, as well as the questions from MP Westcott Williams, asking about that link, that correlation with each other. And one thing to keep in mind is that, you know, while you may be discussing plans on, let's say, something that is needed, such as the the upgrading of the current Simpson Bay, the Lejuez Bridge, as well as how does that fall in line with the spatial planning, zoning. And I will remind that the current effects today of what you see in terms of development, where there is massive excavation, every time it rains, we are contributing more dirt, more soot into the lagoon. So when it comes to dredging, we have that much more work to do because of the work that we're allowing to happen, or the work that we're allowing to happen currently. So going to your goal of a 2030 vision, it's exactly piggybacking on a question from MP Westcott, where what is the planning on it? Because today's issue now is if we don't take action today, we are going to have a bigger problem in 2030. And that is, we're 7 years away from that. So there's a lot of destruction. There's a lot of damage. There's a lot more work that we could create if we don't take action today. And that means requiring courage, making unpopular decisions, but we really do have to think about what are we going to allow? Because you look around, you can't say that we can stop any construction, development. You can't say, no, stop it all now. That just doesn't exist in this world. But you can say, what is my vision long-term? What is happening now currently that I could put some control on in order to protect our environment more? So I just wanted to bring that up, because not only are you putting this, you meaning the Ministry of Cvromi, putting this in your plan, and like I said, let me repeat, it's amazing to see a plan like this. But this plan needs to make sure that it's repeated every day, every second, because we are now at the point where we are reaching our capacity of what this island can handle. And I just don't know whether or not we want to have Miami City on St. Martin. And also in going along with plans, future plans. So the strategy here that we've been presented talks about plans for, we have issues hillside, we have zoning, we have coastline erosion. How are we going to sort of bring that into the forefront so that we can adapt our way of working going forward? So we want to protect the environment, yet what are the current plans in place? What is happening? More than just the Great Bay development, is there still a plan to develop the Little Bay Pond, the pond close to the Cahill, Bel Air area? And I want to know if there is a plan to do that, then how does that fall in line with your plan to improve our infrastructure, protect the environment, come up with a zoning plan? Because if we're going to destroy another environmental or another pond, then again, it's in contradiction with this great start to spatial development plan that you have presented here today. Also, is there a plan in here? Because maybe you can correct me. Sorry, I was trying to keep it at the forefront, but is there a plan to protect certain areas of this island? Because we have destroyed a lot of our ponds. They have disappeared. And now what we have remaining, which is why I asked the question about the Little Bay Pond in Cahill Bel Air area, are we going to destroy that one too? And when you talk about protecting our waterways, is that going to go in alignment with protecting mangroves, which you need for your environment? So I just want to know which areas will be protected, which areas are still planned as in waterways for development. And also I want to bring last thing about this, and then I wanted to share some information. How is the strategic or spatial plan in alignment with what is happening on the French side? The same problems on the French side exist on the Dutch side. We constantly hear people referring to 16 square miles, but we are more than that. And while we cannot directly make policy on the French side, our policies on the Dutch side can be influenced as to what's happening there and vice versa. So I want to know, how far is the dialogue, or is there even any dialogue with the French side when it comes to urban planning, coastline erosion, anything related to that aspect, especially when, you know, on the French side, you had a community that was doing strikes, that was blocking the roads because it was infringing on what people could do on their property as a way to protect them after the hurricane. But then again, you're taking away their property from them and giving them no option of how to survive and live where they were before and rebuild where they were before. So what is the communication with the French side? And if there is no communication, I suggest that you plan it to do that. Also, I would like to share something with the Minister of Cvromi as well as his staff. The University of St. Martin has 2 courses ongoing right now. I am enrolled in one of them. It's done in conjunction with Delft University of Technology. It is called Urban Development Management in Uncertain Times. I will just read the first 2 lines. The first 2 lines go, how is your house price influenced by climate change? Why do we still build along eroding coasts? What can governments do on state and local level to prepare the built environment for these climate challenges? It goes into talking about governance, government policy, who the stakeholders are, private, public, and I believe that if the course costs $250, I do not work for the University of St. Martin. I am enrolled in the course, but I think if you guys could have, my apologies, if the Ministry of Cvromi could have a representative there, I think it would be fantastic for you to have that dialogue and to show them what you have come up with today here. The course runs from 9th of January until the 11th of February. It's on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. I can share it with you via the Griffier, via the chairman. I believe that it would be well worth your while to be there in that dialogue because we have a very good representation of various stakeholders from the island there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP De Wever. I now give the floor to MP Gomes. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon again to everyone here and everyone tuned in, and to the Minister and his staff. Mr. Chairman, again, thank you to the Minister for the presentation and to Ms. Narain as well for your clear explanation of the vision and the work behind it. I have to say my question is going to be based off the presentation alone because we received a very in-depth 118-page plan yesterday, so I've not had an opportunity to study it in its entirety. I'd like to branch off a bit from MP Westcott's question about actionable plans for implementing the policy, which the presentation itself made clear is non-binding. I just want to know if the ministry has discussed or considered moratoriums on development, because it is possible, similar to what our neighbor Anguilla did in 2005, where they placed embargoes and moratoriums on major new foreign tourism projects for periods of up to 30 months to allow them to actually assess their policies and strategies and to roll out their own spatial development program. This is something that St. Bart's is also now considering, and even the island of Cyprus, which, as we all know, has significantly more land space than we do here on St. Martin. I ask this because it seems counterintuitive a bit to have a guiding document, which is what I regard this plan as, and not investigate, taking a pause on the very things the document is meant to inform on and control. So it would be unfortunate if now the environment is heavily mentioned in the document and is just treated as a sort of check mark on the list of things we should mention and not used as an actual foundation for this and future spatial development discussions and plans. And my second question, Mr. Chairman, the presentation mentioned promoting the harnessing of solar energy via rooftop panel usage. And again, maybe this is explained in the larger document we received, but could the minister, through you, Mr. Chair, or through the Minister, Ms. Narain, share if the desk research included consultation with GEBE regarding connection to the grid and the selling of surplus energy generated per household to GEBE. Most times that this has been discussed or requested by residents in the past, the feedback from GB has been that grid connection is difficult and requires a large capital investment on their part. So if some insight could be shared on that point, and for now on this topic, that's it for me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Gomes. I now give the floor to MP Ponderflit. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Minister, for your presentation. Of course, Ms. Narain and the persons who are viewing, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I want to thank some of my colleagues for questions that were posed, because then it means I don't have to pose any in that direction. Mr. Chairman, The last speaker touched on something that, I had it framed differently with regards to the matter of moratoriums, because you can't keep putting more building in the space. It's not getting any bigger, so you have to look at that very carefully. I was going to be a little more harsh in saying how can we stop it, deter it for a while, but I think a moratorium is the correct word. You can't let people keep developing on and on and on, and you don't have the land space in order to maintain that. But let me thank the minister and his staff, because, a lot of the presentation that I listened to, some of the things I've heard before, and I've maintained in order for you to get things accomplished, you need to have stability. Stability, that's the key, Mr. Chairman. No matter what kind of plans you have, if there is no stability, they will not be executed. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to hear also that the minister had discussion with other stakeholders, because very often we think that the responsibility lies with just government and so on, but it's all of us. All of us live in Ireland together, all of us have our responsibilities. And I believe that once we are all included in the discussion, then we have no excuse to blame anyone but ourselves if things are not executed as they're supposed to be executed once we are part of it. The issue of the high-rise, I was looking at it in another way, to the extent where high-rise mean, if I had, for instance, let's use 100 square meters. We have a building on 100 square meters, one floor, there are 2 persons, you can put maybe 6 floors, then you end up with 12 or 14 persons. Yes, you use the space, but at the same time, it means more persons in that area, more pressure on infrastructure, more people, so it means, again, pressure on the infrastructure, Mr. Chairman. So the island, again, is not getting any bigger, so therefore, that will be a challenge for any minister. One thing that I want to advise, Mr. Chairman, to the minister and the staff is that ensure that any plans, policies, and so on, legislation that probably will come, whether it's national decrees or national ordinances, that we don't copy from bigger countries for copying's sake, but look at what is our reality. Whatever laws or legislation we come with, it has to fit our reality. Let us keep that into consideration when we are making these policies and so on. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I do a lot of driving around in St. Martin, and I saw a lot of, I would call large projects. I mean, apartments, high buildings, and so on. And I'm saying, and I'm telling different areas. I mean, not only Cooper Coy, but in the area of, I would say, even not really Dutch Quarter, but even the town area and so on, Colby area. I used to drive by all the time. Normally, people put what you call those fence, and you can't tell what's going on behind. But when it is finished and they remove it, you see a tremendous project. And I said, I really hope that these persons have followed the necessary procedures and so on in order to acquire the building permits, because the reality is, Mr. Chairman, that government, and I will go out on a limb and say this, that I'm quite sure that the Department of Cvromi and so on, those are the cadastre and those that do the inspection on the road, the controllers, are limited. So what I believe can happen is persons can use that limitation in order to circumvent the law. Mr. Chairman, I think it would be good if, and I can make a list, but that's not actually my job, but I think it would be good to find exactly if all these large projects have followed the necessary requirements in obtaining the building permits and so on, because again, you're going to call for GB, electricity and water, and can GB handle that amount of let's say, business activity and so on. So, Mr. Chairman, it has to reflect in our coffers. The question was asked concerning what the budget would be. I believe that once these projects have followed the requirements, paid for their building permits and whatever is necessary in order to obtain the permission to do what they do, that they should also be reflected in the budget. So I would hope that when the time comes, Mr. Chairman, that this is exactly the case. And I want to close by, again, congratulating the minister and his staff, because, again, sometimes when things seem to be difficult, people try to avoid it, but the minister is taking the bull by the horn, and working as hard as possible in order to get these things done, which have been neglected for years. Let us not forget that. They have been neglected for years, Mr. Chairman. So let us look and give the minister opportunity to work on them and get the job done that has to be done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Ponteflet. I myself have a few questions pertaining to the environment, because I think having renewable energy and attaching that to the environment will make a big difference. So I'll just pose my questions on it to you, Minister. Is the Ministry of Roaming and GB in collaboration with proposing alternative energy, wind power, solar power, etc.? Is the Ministry of Roaming Permit Department proposed to new permit requests of large projects to take alternative energy into consideration? Minister, how does the Building Permit Department of Roaming work when it comes to applying for these types of permits? Is there a team in place to handle a backlog of permits and the reason for more buildings being constructed faster? So does this have an impact on the environment also? Also, how do you go about signing off on these permits? Is it priority-wise, or do you do it from how they come in? Do you also take into consideration the environment when signing off on these permits? What is the Ministry of Rami doing with the car wrecks that's been placed more different places, for etc., across from the movie theater or stuff like that? What is the program to keep cleaning up all the car wrecks for the environment? Why are there, for the last 3 months, with the roadside cleaning, there are no roadside cleaning carried out? And does the roadside cleaning have any contract areas, such as the mangroves alongside the lagoon? Is the contracts part of the lagoon mangroves in other certain areas? Why are there trench cleaning has not been carried out for the last year, if I'm not correct? That's the information been given. How is the issue by GB being resolved concerning the management team? Because if we don't have a management team in place for a clear vision towards renewable energy. Thank you. Minister Durand, do you need a time to prepare for these answers posed by the members of Parliament? Okay, I will adjourn this meeting for 2 minutes. Welcome back. Minister Duran, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to start by thanking the honorable members of parliament for the questions I will pose. We require approximately a week to return with the answers. Of course, they require some interministerial dialogue with respect to specifically the beachside policy, the beach policies for both ministries and other details that we need to get from different departments. So within approximately a week, we will be able to return with the answers.
Thank you, Minister Duran. So this meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled for a week. Are there any other comments or remarks from the members of parliament? Okay. I would like to thank the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, Mr. Egbert Duran, and his support staff for their presence here today and for providing the necessary update. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting, which will be an adjournment. I thank you all for your participation. I hereby adjourn this meeting. No, I got